We start, though, with the latest on that racist attack at a Buffalo supermarket. President Joe Biden met with victims' families Tuesday and blasted the white supremacist ideology behind the shooting.
In a strong rebuke, the president called the attack an act of terrorism and called on all of America to reject white supremacy and those who enable it.
White supremacy is a poison. We need to say as clearly and forcefully as we can that the ideology of white supremacy has no place in America. None.
NBC News Now correspondent Maura Barrett joins us now from Buffalo. Maura, good morning to you. So we know 10 people were killed in Saturday's shooting. President Biden visited with the families of the victims. What did he say to them, and how did he pay tribute to those lives lost?
Good morning. Yeah, President Biden and Dr. Joe Biden visited the Tops supermarket and the memorial just off camera to my right yesterday, placing flowers among the growing memorial that we've seen in recent days. He then went and spoke with family members and survivors of the shooting, as well as law enforcement who were present, thanking them for what they did to protect the community. But he told them first and foremost that he and Dr. Joe Biden were there to help them grieve.
Jill and I bring you this message from deep in our nation's soul. In America, evil will not win, I promise you. Hate will not prevail, and white supremacy will not have the last word.
Biden called the attack a murderous, racist rampage, and he spoke about the need to get assault weapons off of the streets. Obviously, we've seen a lot of push for gun legislation through Congress in recent years and have gotten nowhere. And so he also noted, though, that he thinks that the hate and extremism that we've seen spread online is something that can be controlled and can prevent further radicalization of other terrorists. And so that's something that he focused on while also providing empathy to the community here.
Let's talk more about one point you just brought up. President Biden calling for Congress to act on gun violence. But Buffalo City Council President Pastor Darius Pridgen told us that the community's sadness really has shifted to frustration because the nation just hasn't seen any movement on gun legislation following so many other mass shootings in this country, despite many calls for action. What are you hearing from the community after the president's visit?
Well, the mayor here also spoke after meeting with the president. He said he did see a resolve in the president and what he wanted to get and what he wanted to work in the White House and in Congress to accomplish. But you make a good point there. And so when I was speaking to Pastor Pridgen about what can be done, what this community is looking for in terms of change, he said that there is that shift to frustration and anger, understandably, even as the community is in mourning. And so he told me that while they want to make sure there is change that comes from this, there's that big question mark about what will actually happen. But he did see a positive in this tragedy. I want you to listen to some of our conversation.
But now people are like, okay, is anything really going to change on a government level? Is the president really going to go back home and work with, Congress to do something for our neighborhood? I think that by this murderer live streaming his actions, putting up online his manifesto, I think that it's really hard for Americans who try to act as if there is no racism anymore in America.
And so he's saying point blank, we can't ignore it anymore. It was right there on video for everyone to see. And Pastor Pridgen will be holding several services as funerals start this weekend, Joe.
And Maura, a quick question about the suspect. A felony hearing is set for tomorrow. We know he appears to have left that extensive internet footprint. How is that playing into the investigation? What can we expect from tomorrow's hearing?
Right, so tomorrow will be a felony hearing for the suspect, and we're basically going to have a layout because he posted so much online on various different platforms. There is that physical evidence in addition to the video we saw on the live stream, as well as his additional plans that he detailed in his manifesto. And so the DA right now has charged him with one count of murder. We can expect further counts to be brought, obviously, since multiple people were killed in this attack. But that one charge was enough to at least bring him into court, the DA told NBC. And there they're also saying that they expect to see more brought by the grand jury as well as the federal charges. Now, I do want to quickly add, as we just got a statement from the Broome County DA, that's the county where the shooter went to high school in Binghamton. And you'll probably remember there's been a lot of conversation about, did we know that this could have happened? Because there was a murder-suicide claim by the gunman just last year at his high school. And so the Broome County DA releasing a statement this morning saying he wanted to set the record straight, saying that the school followed protocol and contacted the New York State Police, but that while he made those comments about murder-suicide, he didn't make any specific threats to a student or the school, and he didn't mention any firearms. So this is something, given his mental health history and that past claim, that's something we can expect to be brought up in court as well. But just a little new detail there from the county DA just south of here, Joe.
Maura Barrett reporting from Buffalo. Thank you.
Now, experts are questioning what could have been done to stop the shooting, as you were just hearing from Maura. New York has a red flag law intended to get guns out of hands of people who are deemed a risk. But as NBC News correspondent for investigations Tom Winter tells us, the law was not used when the suspect was investigated less than a year ago.
From police to prosecutors to school administrators and to the alleged shooter's family, tough questions are being asked about what more could have been done to prevent 10 black people from being shot dead by an alleged racially motivated killer in Buffalo, New York. Some experts now questioning how the 18-year-old suspect was able to possess a legally purchased assault rifle allegedly used in the killings just less than a year after officials investigated him over threats he allegedly made while in school. In New York, extreme risk protection orders, more commonly referred to as red flag orders, are designed to give law enforcement, schools, and families the power to ask a judge to take someone's guns or prevent them from buying new ones if that person poses a threat to themselves or others. But a state police spokesperson says in this case, nobody asked for such order.
I was shocked to learn that the police did not apply for an extreme risk order here. What it says to me is that we need to have more training for law enforcement and for others who are able to use this powerful tool so that they know in what circumstances it's appropriate, what the processes are. So-called red flag laws are fairly new across the nation. 19 states and the District of Columbia have them, with a majority adopting the law after the 2018 Parkland shooting in Florida. Since New York's red flag law went into effect in August 2019, over 1,400 extreme risk protection orders have been issued, and research shows they help reduce gun violence. Still, this latest shooting, a clear sign that some cases can slip through the cracks.
They interviewed the individual, and they ultimately determined that they were going to bring him in for a mental health evaluation. It was about a day and a half when the individual was released.
This isn't a matter of bringing people into mental health care facilities. This is about whether they are allowed to possess weapons. And it's something that is moved forward with, even if it's determined this person doesn't have mental health issues.
One development in this case that's not in question, a commitment from law enforcement and New York Governor Kathy Hochul to conduct a full review of what happened in the hope of preventing future heartache. It's not entirely clear that this protective order could have stopped this alleged shooter. Possible loopholes, well, these orders aren't permanent, and future gun sales involving background checks are the only ones that are affected.
All right, Tom Winter, thank you.
The November election ballot is taking shape in the key swing state of Pennsylvania, though that high-profile Republican primary for Senate is still too close to call. TV Dr. Mehmet Oz is locked in a neck-and-neck battle with former Wall Street executive David McCormick, with 94% of the vote in. The winner is going to face Democrat John Fetterman, who won his primary handily despite a recent health scare.
I think every time I'm going to comment on this election music and how it's back. And in the race for Pennsylvania governor, Doug Mastriano, the candidate endorsed by former President Trump, took the Republican victory. He built a following by attempting to overturn the 2020 election results. This fall, he'll be up against Democrat Josh Shapiro, who ran unopposed. Now, one reason this race is particularly something to watch, the winner will appoint the Secretary of State who will oversee the 2024 election in Pennsylvania, of course, a critical swing state. We also have results from North Carolina. Republican Ted Budd and Democrat Sherry Beasley will square off this fall for the state's open Senate seat. And that's where we begin with NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray, who yesterday was just as excited as I was about that election music. We've also got Vaughn Hilliard with us. Now, Ted Budd was able to fend off former Governor Pat McCrory, who many know for signing that controversial North Carolina bathroom bill into law back in 2016, something that got national attention. How important was Trump's endorsement, and what does this result say about where the GOP is right now, Mark?
Yeah, Savannah, so it was important. But one thing to keep in mind about North Carolina versus some of the other places is that the entire conservative infrastructure was behind Ted Budd. So not only did Donald Trump ended up endorsing Budd, but so did the Club for Growth. And as we've seen in a lot of contests, like in last week's Ohio Senate race, sometimes the Club for Growth, a conservative organization, and former President Donald Trump have been on opposite sides. In North Carolina, they were on the same side. But in other contests, we ended up seeing that Donald Trump's endorsement really didn't work out all that well. And so Madison Cawthorn, the controversial Republican congressman from North Carolina, ended up losing. Also, in Idaho, Donald Trump's endorsement of Lieutenant Governor Lieutenant Governor Janice McGeachin ended up losing to incumbent Governor Brad Little. McGeachin was endorsed by Trump, and so it was a night of mixed endorsement results for the former president.
I want to ask you more about something you just brought up. Probably the biggest headline maybe this morning in North Carolina is the 11th district got so much attention because of the annex of first-term Congressman Madison Cawthorn. He's faced scandal after scandal recently, so he lost that deep red district despite being endorsed by Trump. What's the takeaway from that one?
Sometimes, Joe, there are just too many scandals, too many controversies that it overwhelms you. What really did stand out to me, the incumbent Senator Tom Tillis ended up endorsing Chuck Edwards, the candidate who ended up defeating Madison Cawthorn. And so a lot of members of the Republican establishment basically moved in to defeat Cawthorn despite Donald Trump's endorsement. And so sometimes, Joe, we ended up seeing the Donald Trump presidency over 4 years. There were scandal after scandal. A lot of people would say, whatever ended up happening? Well, Donald Trump ended up losing re-election in 2020. And sometimes, like in North Carolina, even with a freshman congressman like Madison Cawthorn, there just become too many scandals and too many controversies.
Let's now bring Vaughn in here and get to Pennsylvania, obviously a major state to watch. Vaughn is in Philadelphia. Now, that GOP Senate race, as Joe mentioned, is still too close to call, but this is the one with Dr. Oz. So, Vaughn, that contest that was shaken up in the final weeks by the surprising rise of a conservative commentator, Kathy Barnett, how much did that particular surge affect the outcome, and how is it looking this morning, though too close to call?
Yeah, Savannah and Joe, I think we were up late last night. I think probably we were going to bed right as you guys were getting up here for the show. This is a race that we're looking at within, 3,000 votes right now is the margin. And there's potentially 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 ballots outstanding. We don't have an exact number of how many ballots need to be counted at this time. But what you see in these results is Mehmet Oz, the celebrity TV doctor, and David McCormick, the former hedge fund CEO, within a margin that is ultimately probably going to lead to a recount here. But you asked about Kathy Barnett. She's the conservative commentator here who is, despite not having the Trump endorsement, was running as a MAGA candidate, in her own words there, essentially suggesting that it didn't take Donald Trump's acknowledgement to be the most so-called America First candidate. And she made inroads. She isn't going to win this nomination here. At the same time, she diluted the votes of both of these individuals. And I was talking to Barnett's advisor, who told me that they believe that they had an impact particularly on Mehmet Oz. When you look at some of these counties around the greater Philadelphia area here, where Oz was expecting to perform better, that would suggest that that is the case. If he doesn't pull it off, we may be calling Barnett a spoiler.
Vaughn, you look great for so little sleep. So I'm going to ask you one more question about the governor's race there. It's going to be one of the most watched matchups this fall. Help us understand this campaign that Doug Mastriano has run so far. And is it going to work in a general election this November, or is he going to have to change the message?
I mean, that is the question here that not only Pennsylvania voters are going to be looking at, but also potentially voters in the likes of Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan. I name those states here because they have leading Republican candidates that really kind of echo the Doug Mastriano message. What is that message? The 2020 election was rigged. These governors in each of these states, they are tasked with certifying the election results in their elections. And so if Doug Mastriano were to become the governor of Pennsylvania, he'd be in charge of certifying the results of the 2024 presidential election here. And that is where potentially we are looking at electoral chaos in the situation that, let's say a Donald Trump, if he were to run again, and lose, and T would not validate Joe Biden or another Democrat's victory here. We are talking about a very complicated moment for our democracy here. And I think that is where the question will come down to Pennsylvania voters here. He will be facing the current Democratic Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, who had no challenger in the Democratic primary here for governor. It's going to be quite the race over these next 5 months.
Wow. Say the 2024 election starts right now. Yeah. Vaughn and Mark, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And now from our earthly politics to UFOs. For the first time in more than half a century, Congress held a public hearing to discuss them. They're officially called unidentified aerial phenomena, and there have been plenty of reported sightings out there. So where do we go from here? NBC News correspondent Gadi Schwartz has the latest.
New video of a UFO shown to lawmakers in Congress, raising more questions than answers.
I do not have an explanation for what this specific object is.
The footage, recorded from a fighter pilot's cell phone, capturing a few frames of a metallic object.
UAPs are unexplained, it's true, but they are real. They need to be investigated, and many threats they pose need to be mitigated.
Pentagon officials using the video during a congressional hearing as an illustration of how hard it is to determine what the objects actually are. Last year, the Pentagon releasing a report looking into more than 140 cases of what they called unidentified aerial phenomena. The Pentagon officials said at least 18 cases included sensor data showing the objects behaving in ways they could not explain, but also releasing video of other cases they say are likely man-made drones appearing to swarm Navy ships during a series of incidents that involved an object seen dropping into the water.
What was splashed? Do we have any sensors underwater to detect on submerged UAPs?
So I think that would be more appropriately addressed in closed session, sir.
Intelligence committee members then briefed behind closed doors, while other members of Congress expressed frustration over a lack of answers.
I do not fear the American public knowing what we have. I would sure as heck like them to see it.
Our thanks to Gadi Schwartz for that report.
Joining us now to dive further into all of this phenomena is Greg E. Gigian. He is a professor of history at Penn State University. Good morning, Professor. Thanks so much for joining us. So this hearing we were just talking about, were you surprised by anything that came out of it? What stood out to you?
Well, you know, in many ways, not a lot. I thought we went over a lot of territory we've been over before. And we got to remember what this was really about. I mean, what it was back in December, the National Defense Authorization Act had said that by the end of June, an office needs to be set up that is relatively permanent and dedicated to the study of these unidentified flying objects, or UAP. And so the subcommittee was really just mostly interested in saying, where are we? Are we getting there? Are we at this point? So a lot of what we heard really in the session was a lot of stuff we've kind of heard before. Maybe what was new was to hear that a director of that program has now been named, though the person was not publicly named. And we've heard that the folks who are looking into this in intelligence are setting up a whole set of really rigorous protocols for collecting data, storing the data, analyzing the data, and try to get behind this. But beyond that, we didn't get a lot of answers.
So, Professor, I mean, you were featured in a Showtime docuseries about UFOs. You've acknowledged that many discussions around this topic are rooted in conspiracy theories. Here you are, a legitimate expert who focuses on the science. How do you deal with conspiracy theories? And what's your advice to the rest of us who are learning about this topic and really want, like you, the most accurate information?
Well, you know, of course, I look at conspiracy theories as part of really the whole social and political culture surrounding this phenomenon, surrounding a whole bunch of different phenomena for that matter. It's something that is so enmeshed and entangled in the UFO question. It started already in just the earliest years of the so-called flying saucer sightings in the 1940s. And it's something that's there, and it's always going to, I think, be there and be part of it. But I think, as you're hinting at, what it does, and in fact, both officials yesterday flagged this and said, said, what it does is it clouds the subject up. It makes it a little difficult to know what's reliable and what's not reliable. And what I would have to say is that, unfortunately, it's a very, very difficult thing to be able to disentangle what are reputable, reliable sources of information and what might be less reputable. And that's one of the things you have to sort of manage through yourself.
Quickly on this last one, which isn't terribly fair considering the topic, but where do you stand in terms of the presence of UFOs? Is there life out there?
Well, no one knows for sure, right? I consider myself an open-minded, skeptical agnostic is the way I put it. We don't have anything definitive at this point in time, nothing that's convinced a whole wide range of independent investigators, so we're still waiting for answers.
All right, Professor, thanks so much for joining us this morning. We do appreciate it.
Sure.
All right, time to get a check on your morning news now. Weather?
Which means Michelle Grossman joins us in studio. Hi, Michelle.
Good morning, you guys. And we are looking at a summer sizzler. It feels like summer at least, and it's still spring. We have that jet stream so far to the north. It's kind of keeping that cool Canadian air up to the north and allowing that warm air coming in. So more records challenged today. We've had 11 straight days of 90s and 100s in the state of Texas, and we're going to do it again today. So San Antonio, 100 degrees. That is 13 degrees above what is typical for this time of year. Dallas, you're close to 102. 98 today, Laredo 104, 92 in Little Rock, and 93 in Jackson. And then as we go throughout tomorrow, this heat, the 90s are going to spread to the east. So we're 10, 20 degrees above what is typical for this time of year. Charlotte 94 tomorrow. That's 15 degrees above average for this time of year. And Savannah, you are at 95. Not you, Savannah. This is Savannah. You're at 10. By the weekend, we're looking at temperatures in the 80s for Pittsburgh Friday and Saturday, and 71 by Sunday. So we are going to cool down as we head towards the weekend. So as we go throughout today, also, we're looking at those May storms, right? It's severe weather season, so we're seeing a cold front after cold front after cold front. That will be the story today. That's your trigger mechanism, along with that warm air in place. So as we go throughout today, we're seeing that cold front swinging into the Ohio Valley, late day storms with that second cold front developing across the Midwest. And we could see some hail, some gusty winds, also some flooding rains with these storms. Then tomorrow, here's another cold front right on the heels. New severe threat for Minnesota, Iowa, also Wisconsin. Heavy rain possible with some flooding, even up to 3 inches in some spots. We've had so much rain there, guys. We're going to continue to watch that. And then the bullseye for the storms this afternoon will be in parts of Kentucky.
All right. Wow. Heat across the country.
Yeah.
I kind of like summer. Me too.
And you're a 10 too.
Yeah,
so.
That was so so smart. 10s all around.
10s all
all in
around.
our Wednesday pink. 10 for that.
Especially those pants the other day.
Oh, those, yes.
Yes, Joe's red carpet look. Celebrity.
You can Google it if you don't know what we're talking about. All right. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thanks, Michelle. See you in a bit. Yeah.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.